They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies, a place built not to punish the body, but to erase the soul. Hidden deep in the mountains of Florence, Colorado, stands a fortress so secure, even the air feels like it's under surveillance. No one has ever escaped. No one ever will. Inside its concrete veins live the ghosts of America's darkest minds: terrorists, assassins, drug lords, and traitors. But behind those locked steel doors lies something far more terrifying than any inmate, a secret about what this place really does to a human being. This is the story of the most dangerous prison ever built, and the twisted psychology behind a system that turns punishment into isolation and isolation into madness. Welcome to ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just another prison story. This is a descent into the most secretive, most feared prison in America, a place built not to rehabilitate, but to erase. Buried deep in the Rockies, hidden from the world, stands a concrete fortress where sunlight barely touches the floor, and silence is the loudest sound you'll ever hear. Welcome to ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Let's begin. The prison built for monsters. It's 1994. The U.S. federal government is facing a problem it can no longer ignore. Across the country, prisons are breaking down. Riots, murders, escapes. Some inmates are too violent, too unpredictable, too infamous to be held anywhere safely. Even the notorious Alcatraz, once considered inescapable, was long shut down, its legend fading into the fog. So the government decided to build something new, not just a prison, but a machine of control, a place where the nation's most dangerous criminals could be locked away, permanently, not just from society, but from reality itself. And so, in the barren desert of southern Colorado, construction began on a facility that would come to define modern isolation. It would be called ADX Florence, the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility. But those who've seen its inside, they don't call it that. They call it Hell Mountain. Designed for absolute control. From the air, ADX looks like a geometric nightmare. Razor wire spiraling into patterns of control. Every corridor, every door, every cell is designed with a single objective: containment without contact. The walls? Reinforced concrete, 2 feet thick. The windows? For inches wide, just enough to let in a sliver of sunlight, too narrow to see the horizon. Inside, prisoners live in 7 by 12-foot concrete boxes, their world reduced to a bed, a desk, a sink, and a toilet. For 23 hours a day, they remain in isolation. No human touch, no conversation, no escape. Meals slide through small slots in the door, the feeding ports. Showers are automated, controlled remotely. Even the yard, if you can call it that, is a solitary pen, a concrete pit open only to the sky. ADX Florence was engineered to neutralize violence, to make it impossible for inmates to harm guards or each other. But what no one anticipated was how it would destroy the mind. Inside the cell, imagine this. You wake up in darkness. The same gray walls greet you. The same concrete floor chills your feet. You can't hear anyone, just your own breathing. You count the seconds, then the minutes, then the hours. You start talking to yourself, just to remember what your voice sounds like. That's life inside the box. The inmates at ADX Florence don't just serve time, they serve silence. Their punishment isn't the sentence. It's the absence of everything else. Some of them are the most feared men on earth. Ramzi Youssef, mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. El Chapo, Mexico's infamous drug kingpin. Different crimes, same fate. Each man trapped in a cell so small and isolated, it begins to reshape who they are. Psychologists call it sensory deprivation psychosis, a state where the brain starts to eat itself from the inside out. Some inmates begin hearing voices. Others talk to walls. A few stop talking altogether. One former warden once said, "ADX is not designed for humanity. It's designed for compliance. And compliance comes at a cost." The unseen guards. In most prisons, guards walk to tears, keys jingling, boots echoing through corridors. At ADX Florence, it's different. The staff is unseen. Most cell doors are controlled remotely, open and close with the press of a button from a secure command center. Guards watch through cameras. Movements are tracked by sensors. Every second, every heartbeat, every step is monitored. Inmates rarely see a human face, and when they do, it's through thick glass or behind a visor. There are stories, whispered among those who've left the Bureau of Prisons, that some guards forget the faces of the men they watch, because they never see them in person. In ADX, the walls see everything. The walls remember. And sometimes the walls whisper back. The silent system. ADX runs on what's called a step-down program. It's the illusion of progress, a path promising inmates a gradual return to human contact, if they behave. Level 1, complete isolation. Level 2, limited communication. Level 3, monitored interaction. Few ever make it past level 1, because here, good behavior doesn't guarantee freedom. It only proves you can survive the system. And survival in ADX Florence is not a sign of strength. It's a sign you've learned to live with the ghosts. One psychologist who visited said, "This place doesn't rehabilitate. It reorganizes a human mind to fit inside a box. But some minds refuse to be contained. And that's when the real danger begins. The breaking point. The first signs of collapse are subtle. An inmate starts pacing back and forth, exactly 13 steps. Then again. Next comes the whispering. They start talking to invisible people. Then the paranoia. Some believe they're being poisoned. Others think the walls are alive. One man, after 7 years in solitary, started tearing apart his mattress, convinced it was filled with microphones. But the worst cases don't scream. They go silent. Completely. Their eyes lose focus. Their voices fade. It's as if their souls leave before their bodies ever do. Inside ADX Florence, silence is not peace. It's surrender. The legends of the blocks. Each block in ADX has its own mythology. Range 13, where they keep the most dangerous, the untouchables. Men so violent, so unpredictable, they can't even be near other inmates. Rumor has it that even the guards walk that hallway with their body armor fastened tight. Inmates call it the Black Range. Then there's Delta Unit, known for housing terrorists and high-profile federal enemies. The walls here are thicker. The lights never go off. And deep beneath it all, Whisper Speakacy Unit, an underground level few have ever seen. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, some say it's where they keep those who've lost all grip on reality, or those the government would rather the world forget. One former ADX contractor once told a reporter off record, "If you think Area 51 hides secrets, you've never seen Florence at night." The prisoner who vanished. In 2003, something strange happened inside ADX Florence. An inmate, whose name was wiped from federal records, simply disappeared. He wasn't transferred. He wasn't released. And there was no report of death. All that remained in the system was a void, a missing file, an empty cell, and a few terrified whispers from a neighboring range. One inmate claimed he heard a voice coming through the vent that night, not screaming, but laughing. Another swore the man was taken out in the middle of the night by agents who never wore uniforms. Officially, it never happened. But every few months, guards still report hearing tapping sounds from that abandoned cell. 3 knocks, then silence. El Chapo's nightmare. When Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most powerful drug lord on earth, was sentenced to life, people wondered where they could possibly keep him. The answer was obvious. ADX Florence. For a man who once ruled empires, escaped tunnels, and commanded armies, now his world was 7 feet wide. He eats alone, sleeps alone, walks alone. No phones. No visitors except lawyers. No sunlight that lasts longer than a few minutes. He once told his attorneys, "The silence, it kills you slowly." Even El Chapo, a man who controlled billions, couldn't control the one thing ADX takes from everyone. Time that doesn't move. The ghosts in the system. But here's where the story twists. In 2010, reports started surfacing about strange electrical failures in one of ADX's control rooms. doors opening and closing on their own, camera feeds flickering with static. When engineers checked the system, they found something impossible. One of the circuits had been manually overridden from inside a secured cell. To this day, no one knows how. That incident was never made public, but guards began calling it the ghost in the system. And in a place where everyone is supposed to be locked down, that's the one thing they all fear, that something or someone might already be free. The man who saw too much. Every fortress has its cracks, and sometimes those cracks appear where you least expect them. In 2011, an electrical technician named David Leroux was assigned to inspect the surveillance system in one of ADX's control sectors. He wasn't a guard. He wasn't even supposed to know the inmates' names. Just a contractor, in and out. But that day, he saw something he shouldn't have. While monitoring the internal feeds, one camera, cell 213, kept cutting to static. The system showed it as occupied, but the inmate log showed the cell as vacant. When Leroux mentioned it to a security officer, the man simply stared at him and said, "We don't talk about 213. Later that night, Leroux checked the blueprints. There was a cell 213, only it wasn't connected to any corridor. A sealed room, embedded in concrete, no door from the outside. And the strangest part? The camera feed showed movement, a shadow, breathing. 3 weeks later, David Leroux was found dead in his home, ruled a suicide. His files? Deleted. His access badge? Missing. But his brother later revealed he'd left behind a note. One sentence written in shaky handwriting. They're experimenting on isolation. The experiment theory. For years, conspiracy theories have swirled around ADX Florence. But one of them refuses to die. It claims that deep beneath the facility, in sections closed off even from prison staff, the government runs psychological endurance experiments. Not torture in the traditional sense. No whips, no violence, just time. They test how long a mind can survive without touch, without sound, without sunlight, and in some cases, how long it takes to break completely. Whistleblowers from within the Bureau of Prisons have hinted at an unmarked section, sublevel Delta, accessible only to senior officials. They say this is where certain inmates are sent and never seen again. Officially, these stories are fabrications. But the government's secrecy only makes them sound more believable. Because in a prison where no one can see inside, how can anyone know what's really happening? The voices in the vents. Even in total silence, ADX isn't quiet. The vents carry everything. The hum of machinery, the clang of steel, and sometimes something else. Guards say inmates have reported hearing whispers through the air system. Not random sounds. Words. At first, it was dismissed as delusion, isolation hallucinations. But one night, an officer on C Block recorded something on his radio. A faint voice repeating the same phrase over and over. "Can you hear me now?" When they traced the sound, it led to a ventilation shaft that didn't exist on the schematics. The shaft had been sealed for years. And yet, the voice persisted. When the walls move, for years, inmates claim the walls in ADX breathe. The concrete expands and contracts with temperature, creating deep rumbling sounds that echo like distant footsteps. To those locked in darkness, it feels like the building itself is alive. One inmate described it this way. "At night, I swear I can feel it pulsing like a heart, like the place knows I'm here." Psychologists might call it auditory hallucination. But when multiple guards, trained professionals, start reporting the same sounds, the line between madness and mystery begins to blur. The architecture of ADX isn't just built to contain. It's built to remind. Every sound, every vibration, every echo, designed to make you aware of one truth. You are never alone. The day the lights went out. October 17th, 2012. For exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds, ADX Florence went completely dark. Every light, every camera, every motion sensor, offline. The power failure was blamed on a regional grid malfunction. But what happened during those 6 minutes remains classified. When the systems rebooted, several doors across multiple units were found open. No one escaped. No guards were harmed. But every inmate in every cell reported the same thing. I heard someone walk in the halls. The coded note. In 2014, a federal attorney visiting ADX received a hand-drawn letter from an inmate known as Marcus Vale, a former military intelligence officer turned whistleblower. The letter was strange, a single page covered in symbols, numbers, and coordinates. At the bottom, Vale had written, "They're mapping the mind." No one could decode the letter. Days later, Vale was found dead in a cell. Official cause, suicide by asphyxiation. But there was no sign of struggle, no tool, no ligature. He simply stopped breathing. Some believe the code he left behind contained directions, not to a place, but to a protocol, something that hinted at how ADX's behavioral management system might really work. Because in ADX, control isn't physical, it's psychological. And sometimes it's invisible. Program Hades. Documents leaked in 2016 by a former Bureau analyst reveal references to a classified initiative called Program Hades, short for Human Adaptation and Deprivation Endurance Study. The purpose? To study long-term cognitive responses to isolation, control, and routine deprivation in extreme environments. The location redacted, but one line in the report mentions South Central Colorado facility, maximum containment. There's only one place that fits that description, ADX Florence. The files detail strange procedures, controlled sensory input, manipulated light cycles, and something called feedback conditioning, where inmates' heart rates were monitored to time certain environmental cues. It said the goal was not to punish prisoners, but to see how far the human mind could bend before it breaks. The night warden. Among ADX's staff, there's a legend about a figure known only as the night warden. They say he's not listed on any roster, doesn't clock in, and doesn't appear on security footage. But guards report seeing him patrolling the halls after midnight. A tall man in an old-style warden's coat, carrying a lantern. Those who've seen him say he never speaks. He just stops, looks into their eyes, and walks away. Some call it superstition. Others believe it a manifestation, a ghost of the prison's own conscience. Because in a place where time stands still, maybe ghosts are the only things that move freely. The Forgotten Range. There's one corridor, Range 9, officially listed as storage. But older staff members whisper about what it used to be. Before ADX officially opened, Range 9 was reportedly a test range, used to evaluate the sensory isolation system. Early subjects weren't inmates. They were volunteers. Military personnel promised short assignments and early release. None of them lasted longer than 6 weeks. One reportedly gouged his own eyes, screaming, "I can still see the walls." After that, Range 9 was sealed, officially repurposed, unofficially erased, and yet guards say sometimes they still hear knocking behind its concrete barrier, slow, deliberate like a code. The final experiment. By 2020, ADX Florence was no longer just a prison. It had become a question about power, about control, about how far we'll go to protect society from its monsters, even if it means becoming the monster ourselves. Whistleblowers vanished, files deleted, and yet patterns remain. Every few years, new prisoners disappear from the records, quietly, without explanation. Every few months, guards quit unexpectedly, refusing to speak. Every few days, the hum of the ventilation system carries whispers no one can trace. And maybe that's the true secret of ADX Florence. Not that it's a fortress of steel and concrete, but that it's a living experiment, one that never ends. Some prisons keep people in. Others keep secrets from getting out. The man who spoke in numbers. They called him the calculator. A former cybersecurity expert turned white-collar prisoner, sentenced for data breaches tied to federal surveillance programs. When he arrived at ADX Florence, staff expected another arrogant genius. Instead, they found man-obsessed. Every day, he scratched numbers into the wall of his cell, long strings of digits. Guards thought it was meaningless. But one inmate on the adjacent range, a linguist, later claimed the numbers were GPS coordinates, all pointing to restricted federal sites. Before anyone could investigate, the calculator stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He was found motionless on the floor, his last set of numbers etched into the concrete with his fingernails. When decoded, they pointed directly to Florence, Colorado, right where he already was. Some believe he discovered something hidden beneath the prison itself, something meant to stay buried. The architect's confession. The blueprints of ADX Florence are classified, but every design begins with a name. That name was Dr. Leonard Kessler, a structural psychologist and architect. He wasn't a prison builder. He was a behavioral engineer. In an unpublished interview found years after his death, Kessler admitted, "We weren't just designing a facility. We were designing a psychological environment. Every angle, every echo, every shadow was meant to influence behavior." He described echo corridors, hallways built to subtly distort sound and orientation, cells aligned in mathematical ratios derived from behavioral studies on isolation. But when asked if he regretted creating a structure capable of breaking the human mind, Kessler said something chilling. "The structure doesn't break the mind. It shows it to you." The echo corridors. Former guards describe parts of the prison they call echo corridors, narrow passages where footsteps multiply, repeating like phantom movements. The acoustics are so precise that sound seems to come from behind you, even when you're alone. These corridors are rarely used now. Some say too many officers refuse to walk them after hearing whispers that didn't match any living voice. But one guard, speaking anonymously, said something unforgettable. "You can hear breathing, but not from a person. It's like the building itself is alive, inhaling your fear." The engineers called it an unintended resonance pattern. The guards called it something else. The soul of the prison. The artist in the dark. In 2018, an inmate known only as Julian R. began drawing inside his cell using burned matchsticks and crushed tile dust. No one provided him with paper. He drew on his walls. When officers entered months later to repaint, they stopped. The drawings depicted the entire interior of ADX, every cell, every camera, every hallway, mapped with eerie precision. But Julian had never left his room. His art was removed. He was moved to another unit. Within weeks, he stopped responding to his name. He whispered one sentence over and over. "You don't need eyes to see this place." The code in the concrete. In 2020, during routine maintenance, workers discovered unusual magnetic fluctuations beneath the eastern courtyard. When they drilled a small section of the foundation, they found metallic plates embedded within the concrete, engraved with binary code. At first, it was dismissed as rebar tagging until someone translated it. The binary spelled out a phrase. Project Hades continues. The plates were removed, replaced, and sealed under new concrete the next day. The workers were transferred. But one photograph leaked online briefly before disappearing. A grainy image of rusted metal, half covered in dust, showing that single word burned into steel. Hades, the unreported transfers. In 2021, investigative journalist Lena Cortez filed a Freedom of Information request on inmate transfers from ADX Florence. The official record showed 419 inmates, but the previous year's audit listed 431. 12 inmates unaccounted for. No release records. No transfers. No deaths. When Cortez contacted the Bureau of Prisons, she received a generic reply. Record discrepancies due to data realignment. Days later, she disappeared. Her car was found near Florence, engine still running, driver's seat empty. Inside her glove compartment was a notebook, one phrase underlined 3 times. They never left. The reverb room. In the lower maintenance tunnels of ADX lies a chamber staff referred to as the reverb room. It's small, square, windowless, built with special soundproof panels. When guards test their radios inside, they malfunction. Signals bounce endlessly until voices overlap. It was originally built as an acoustic lab, but rumor says it became something else. An isolation simulator used for testing prisoner behavior. A former technician described his experience inside. 5 minutes feels like an hour. You can hear your heartbeat echo through your skull. Then, suddenly you hear another one that isn't yours. The broken camera. Security feeds at ADX are recorded 24/7, or so they claim. But one feed, dated February 3rd, 2022, shows something unexplainable. At 2:17 a.m., the camera facing range 13 flickers. For exactly 4.3 seconds, a shadow moves across the corridor, tall, thin, humanoid. Then, every light bulb on the range bursts simultaneously. When technicians reviewed the footage, the file corrupted. When restored, the timestamp had changed to January 1st, 1995, the year ADX opened. The internal report was buried, but one IT staff member leaked a single screenshot, a blur, shaped like a man, glowing faintly. He claimed it wasn't a person. It was a thermal echo, heat left behind by something that shouldn't have been there. The missing blueprint. When architects design prisons, they create redundant layers of documentation. Structure, power, airflow, emergency escape routes. But ADX's records have one page missing. Blueprint 47B, the sublevel ventilation schematic. Its existence is confirmed by serial numbering, but the page itself is gone. When a journalist asked the Bureau of Prisons about it, the spokesperson smiled and said, "Some doors are better left closed." Rumors persist that 47B outlines an underground ring, a perfect circle of sealed rooms used for containment testing. Those who've seen fragments of the blueprint describe one central word stamped in red: core access restricted. The core. No one truly knows what lies beneath ADX Florence. Some say it's nothing, just foundations and utilities. Others say it's where program Hades began, and where it never ended. Satellite imaging shows heat signatures inconsistent with the rest of the facility, concentrated directly beneath the central yard. One guard, now retired, described hearing machinery humming below his feet. Another claimed he felt vibrations, like an underground generator that never stopped. And one final whisper, from an anonymous letter sent to a Denver newspaper, claimed this: under ADX, there's another prison. One without names, without records, without sound. The real Alcatraz of the Rockies. Maybe ADX Florence isn't just the end of the line. Maybe it's the beginning of something we were never meant to find. ADX Florence was never meant to be seen, never meant to be understood. It was built as a place where the worst of humanity would simply disappear. But behind those concrete walls and triple locked doors are stories. Stories of men who were broken long before they arrived, and of others who were slowly dismantled by the silence itself. In the end, ADX isn't just a prison. It's a mirror reflecting what happens when control turns into obsession, and punishment becomes something far darker than justice. If this story left you thinking or shivering, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because the next story might be even darker, and it's one you won't want to miss.